I think there needs to be a mea culpa on behalf of the industry first, in the sense that in this moment, there are no blockchains that I'm aware of in operation that absolutely bury in performance centralized databases like Amazon Web Services. So that's one thing. So we're talking about promise. We're not talking about something that has already been fully delivered.
Sure, potential.
Potential. Two, in that piece that I wrote, The Hypercapitalism or a World Without Need, I talk about this bifurcating possibility for the use. It's a tool. It's empty. It's like the parable of the hammer.
Because blockchain is just a concept.
It's an idea of how information is distributed, accessed, shared. But it is also true that, most macroeconomic analysis is the most valuable commodity on Earth is data now. It's not even energy, it's data. So with, the hammer, you can smash things, you can build things. And so with distributed ledger technologies, you had an interesting inflection point. And I use the analogy of the ARPANET, right? The very, very, very beginning of the internet. Essentially, a bunch of nerds were like, hey, we can send mail instantly electronically anywhere on Earth. Amazing. And Wall Street and profiteers looked at that and they said, can't make money there. And they basically left them alone. And those people had enough time to build a pretty altruistic system. And the most common expression of that is net neutrality. And so this was a vision that they saw of, Moore's law, increased computational power, diminishing cost of computers. Eventually, every human being has a computer. And through it, in a totally egalitarian way, no manufactured scarcity, you could access all of human knowledge. And that is beautiful, right? And the Electronic Frontier Foundation and other organizations fought to maintain it, and it died. It took about 30, 40 years, the invention of the attention economy, right? The money that you earned from your eyeball minute, and it eventually was eroded. So I think of distributed ledger tech as this power. Go ahead.
I want to ask you about that. How did that concept end?
Net neutrality, essentially through legislation, was abolished.
Oh, you're talking about specifically net. Oh, so that's what you mean when you wrote about how the original concept of the internet is not.
Right. So net neutrality. So now, for instance, it's legal for internet service providers to give 2 speeds. Right. I was just there in Mexico. Man, the internet was slow, but I could pay for faster. Right. And so now you've got hierarchy, you've got manufactured scarcity.
What people were worried was going to happen, that's actually started happening.
That is now more the rule than the exception globally for how we access information. So if you're poor, your ability to access all of human knowledge is weaker or inferior to if you're rich, right? And that's what they were trying to make sure didn't happen. So that was mail. This time, it was the altruistic promise is any 2 people or entities can safely and securely transact online with anyone else in the world if you build the right infrastructure. Unfortunately, the very first blockchain with proof of work and Bitcoin and Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper proved that we could instantiate, we could solve for double spend. We could instantiate a pool of currency with a finite limit to how much is going to be in circulation. And we don't need a central bank. We don't need a bank at all. We can just do it with software. And the problem with that is this time it wasn't mail. This time it was money. And so the Fortune 100 was like, we would like to invent money. And so everyone piled in. And so what I've experienced over the last year is a frenzy of greed, frankly, and speculation and hype, and in some cases even fraud. And no certainty around a regulatory framework. But the people who were trying to operate legitimately like we were begging for regulatory clarity because we want to play by the rules. And we know that having regulatory clarity and rules to the road would cause a lot of institutional money to come into the space. And that's today, that still hasn't happened. And I think America's missing the boat on that. There are other much smaller municipalities. This is all digital technology, so people can move anywhere on Earth relatively easily. And so other smaller municipalities are giving those clear and pretty indulgent regulatory frameworks. And so a lot of companies associated with this are relocating there.
Okay, great. Well, yeah. I mean, let's talk more. Let's talk more about this and the benefits of this. Mm-hmm. So this, from the sounds of that, brings the power back to the people. It sounds like takes it out of it. Could this is all speculative. Speculative. All potential. Mm-hmm. But the reason why the concept is growing so much is because it could potentially take the power away from. Or control, central authorities, banks, other institutions, brokers.
It can give leverage. Mm-hmm. You can end up with leverage, or you can end up simply cutting these giant organizations out of the picture. Mm-hmm. So there's understandably some resistance there, I think, or the desire to use all these technological tools and this vocabulary, but to do it in proprietary ways. So a lot of projects like I know Hyperledger's been hired to do a number of projects where the blockchain projects are essentially opaque, or they're proprietary rather than open source and fully visible. And for me, that is, it'll work, and there's value there. There's reason companies are hiring different other companies to do that, but it kind of defeats that altruistic potential that I keep trying to go back to, mm-hmm. right? Which is to essentially, it's to raise the floor on need, right? I think we already have enough resources in the world that it is imaginable that if, and it's going to require sacrifice, if people at the top had less and people at the bottom had more, you can move a lot of people out of that scarcity place and into a more abundant future where they would have their, the possibilities for them manifesting their potential grow exponentially, right? That's the world I want to live in. I would be disgusted, and I think it's certainly possible, that on the next boom, people are calling it the crypto winter. On the next boom, we might see an overnight individual who becomes a trillionaire. And I think that's sad. I think that's kind of a societal illness, right? Would I rather see one trillionaire or 2 billion people instantly mm-hmm. lifted out of poverty because you're delivering cryptocurrency to their smartphone?
Right. So let's talk about how this can do that, how this gives power. Well, I guess, why would the everyday person want to adopt a distributed ledger technology way of living? So it gives power back to us, if you will, and
potentially,
potentially. Why does it do that?
So to answer your question, it's helpful probably to use some concrete examples. So as I mentioned, I was just at OC Impact, where I met my brother from another mother. I hope we'll end up doing amazing projects together. His name's Philip Silva. We had talked on the phone before we went there, and we really clicked because we're driven by the same values, and we both have some network and expertise in this area now. And he's working on a project called Bright ID. There are, and we can talk about what self-sovereign identity means. It really means like there's only one of you in the physical world, right? You can't, and now there are 100 bodies walking around that are all you. You can do that digitally. It's not even that hard. And so people do because it delivers certain advantages. If you could create a digital analog to that, where there's only one of you in the entire world, and that's pretty incontrovertibly provable, all kinds of new possibilities open up, right? If you had, so most of these self-sovereign identity plays are essentially that. It's about you creating one digital identity that you own and control online. Mm-hmm. And that plugs in and can operate in anyone's product or service online. But you're in charge. Now, if you combine that, now you control your data, and you have a platform cooperative of 1 million other people who share your values. You have collective bargaining. You have what unions used to deliver. Those 1 million people can then go to that pharma company and say, we would love to share all 1 million members' patient data with you, and it'll cost you this much. And there are constraints on how you access that, or if the data is anonymized, or you can put whatever constraints you want. You can put it into a smart contract. It can expire a year later, and you can renegotiate whatever you want to do. So that's hugely promising, and that could put passive income into the pockets of everyday people. Because right now, if you're generating $10 a minute on Facebook, I'm making that number up, $10 per minute goes to Facebook. And in that kind of world, if you're generating $10 per minute and you collectively bargain, a percentage of that could go back into your pocket. Right. And so I mean, so basically these self-sovereign identity platforms are usually, most of the ones I know of in development are domain specific. Philip's thing is really cool because there's zero profit motive. It's a nonprofit or an org. And he's trying to create this base layer of a general purpose self-sovereign identity based on your social graph.
And the reason why this is possible is because you're saying that people could essentially, have full ownership of who they are, whatever that is, their deeds, their money, their whatever it is, and they have control over it because of this secure
encrypted
system,
sharded, distributed,
and that's why it's so revolutionary.
Yes, yeah, because that doesn't exist. Basically, what exists in the real world. So right now, you can't be coerced or exploited in a wide range of ways in your physical body. And you can online, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have a choice, right?
So because of this, I wouldn't need to have a million different accounts out there for this company, that company, this
you could
doctor,
still,
that.
It would be like an API. You would plug your self-sovereign identity, say, now my one and only true self is surfing on Facebook.
But if they go down, my information doesn't go down with it.
Yes, you still retain that. That's correct. Yeah, and so there are a lot of attempts to do this kind of stuff, but it's really about giving power and control of your digital assets and your eyeball minutes back to individuals. And there are some incredibly humanitarian applications of this across a wide range of topics. Unfortunately, most people aren't building there because it's not get rich quick.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.